I'm starting the recording now.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan.
All right, letting people in now?
Yep, I think so. It's that time.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. People are still rolling in, so we're going to take a couple more minutes so that more folks have a chance to come in, and then we'll get started.
For the record, I have an alternative agenda to prepare.
We're going to take one more minute, and then we'll get started. I see folks are still arriving. Okay, I think I will go ahead and get us started. Welcome everyone to the February 2021 Lens Neighborhood Association General Membership Meeting. These meetings usually happen once a month on the fourth Tuesday of every month. I'm going to, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce the agenda, but for now I just want to let you know a few housekeeping things. Our code of conduct and our participation agreements. So I have to announce that this meeting is being recorded and we will post it after the meeting. Please keep your mic muted by default. If you need to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function and we will call on you to speak when we're able to. The chat is speech, so please, it will anything you post there, make sure it abides by our code of conduct, which I'll introduce in a moment. We like to save the chat for technical questions so that those have more visibility, and for voting, if we call on a vote, please try to keep it pleasant. Chat is secondary to what we're doing, so if it gets out of control, we might have to remove folks or mute them. If we call for a vote, those of you who are members can vote. We will go over the procedures at the time. We also just want to take a moment to recognize that these meetings take a tremendous amount of time to put together, and we do it as a service to our community. Please respect the facilitators so that together we can achieve our goals of informing, engaging, connecting, and uplifting our community. So with that, I will read the territory acknowledgement. Even though we meet digitally now because of the pandemic, we still read the territory acknowledgement. The Lents Neighborhood Association respectfully acknowledges that we are on traditional village sites of Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, creating communities and summer encampments to harvest and use the plentiful natural resources of the area. Our intent with reading this statement is to recognize that all events we're having are on Native land. We hope to build on this statement, both in terms of conversations to increase visibility for the Native community and accountability for white people, as well as to explore concrete actions we can take to disrupt and dismantle colonialism beyond this territory acknowledgement. Now I will talk about our code of conduct. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather. So let me see if I can hopefully this is visible. These are some things that, you know, the community came together a while ago. We just kind of decided on what kind of, you know, things we want to see more of as a community and what kind of things we find are not very productive to dialogue and making decisions. So with that, we ask that you please avoid speaking out of turn or interrupting. Please avoid personalizing or negative feedback, talking down to others, placing blame, or being disrespectful. Please do assume good intentions, respect the agenda, facilitators, and process. If you've already spoken tonight, consider making space for others to feel heard. Please respect different viewpoints, respect boundaries, do offer constructive criticism or propose solutions. Please be welcoming of new members and guests and get involved. So let's see, there's that. And let's see. I think there's about 28 of us. I think it'd be good if we could just go around really quickly and do a round of introductions so that we kind of know who is here. And I will just, I'll call on folks. I'll start by saying I'm the chair of the Lents Neighborhood Association. My name is Sabina and my pronouns are she or they. Jean?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jean. I'm the LNA or vice chair, sorry, whatever you want to call it, backup person. My pronouns are she, her. I'm really happy to be here with all of you tonight.
Thank you. Morgan?
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm the LNA secretary. My pronouns are she, her, and lovely to see you all.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention, but Jean will be helping me moderate tonight. We're going to tag team. Raven.
I am Raven Drake. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Street Roots Ambassador Program Manager.
Welcome, Raven. Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Williams. I am on the board in one of the at-large two-year positions, and my pronouns are she, her.
Eric Engstrom.
Hello, my name's Eric Engstrom, pronouns he, him. I'm with the city's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
Welcome, Eric. Robin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robin Burrick. I'm the program manager for Portland Street Response. are she, her.
Welcome, Robin. Malin, I hope I said it right.
I'm Maria Lynn Claire. I'm a resident of Lentz, and I'm with Oregon Renters in Action.
Thank you for joining us. Jason.
Hey, I'm Jason Bird. I live in the neighborhood since 2017, and I am an at-large board member.
Thank you. Katie Penna.
Hi, my name is Katie Penna. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a one-year at-large board member of the LNA.
Thank you, Katie. Dan.
Me, McElligott. Hey, so I'm Dan McElligott, and I'm a resident of Lentz.
Okay. Megan Burns.
Hi, so I'm new. I represent the McDonald's at Foster and 82nd.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Dan Tucker. Oops, you have to unmute yourself.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name's Dan Tucker. I'm a resident of Lentz. Pronouns are he, him. That's pretty much it.
Welcome. Good to see you again. Jennifer. All right.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm the Land Use Chair for the Lentz Neighborhood Association, and I've lived in Lentz since 2005.
Thank you. Gerald.
Hi, my name is Gerald Adkins. I am the treasurer for the Lentz Neighborhood Association, and I've been a resident since 2016.
Welcome. Robert.
Which, is it just me?
Robert Schultz.
Yeah, thanks. Robert Schultz, Zer, victim of the bigoted actions of this board.
Okay, Robert, I'm going to remind you of our code of conduct. Please try to respect that. Abigail.
Hi, I'm Abigail. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I have been a resident of Lentz since 2018.
Hi, Abigail. Okay, Autumn West. Would you like to? Okay.
Hi, I'm Autumn West, resident of Lentz. Hi.
Welcome, Autumn. Someone with the name Community Observer, I see they posted in the chat, Jamie here to observe, no mic tonight. That's okay, welcome. Eli Bliss, if I say your name right.
Yeah, you got it right. Hi, everybody. My name's Eli, he, him. I'm Representative Jeff Reardon's legislative assistant, just here to check in and hear what's on people's minds.
Well, thank you for joining us. Courtney Graham.
Hi, my name's Courtney Graham. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a resident here in Lentz.
Welcome. Adam Lyons.
Hey, I'm Adam Lyons. I'm the communications director for Commissioner Mingus Maps, and I was invited to come. I use he, him by one of your residents, so I just wanted to come in and say hello.
Thank you for joining us. Candace Avalos.
Hello, I am Candace Avalos. My pronouns are she, her, and I am not a resident of Lentz, but I am here to be part of the discussion. I'm also the chair of the Citizen Review Committee, which is a police accountability board for the city of Portland. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Candace. Let's see. Joanne, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay. Trying to see all the little icons keep jumping around, so I'm just gonna do my best as a call on the next person, and if I miss anyone at the end, you'll let me know. Anne McMullen.
Hi there. I am not a resident. I live in a nearby neighborhood, but I wanted to listen to the street roots stuff today. We're very intrigued by that, the street response team.
Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. PJ.
Hi there. Thank you. I'm PJ, and I have lived in Lentz since 2007.
Welcome, PJ. David Powell.
Hey, I'm Dave. I'm new to Lentz about a year ago. First meeting sitting in, so thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us. Ruby. Ruby, would you like to introduce yourself if you're able to? I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. We'll move on and then feel free to interject if you want to introduce later. Cora, would you like to introduce yourself?
Cora Potter. I've been a Lentz neighbor since 2006. I use she, her, or they, their pronouns.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Have I missed anyone? If I have, please speak up and introduce yourself. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It's really nice to kind of connect names and faces. With that, I will introduce our agenda. Let me see if I can share my screen. And then I was going to turn it over to Raven.
I have an alternative agenda to propose.
Let's see if this works. So this is our proposed agenda for tonight. We're going to take a couple minutes to discuss principles of nonviolent communication to help us kind of with our conversation tonight. And I've asked Raven to do that. And then we are going to move straight into the topics that I know you're all here for. The first one, the Shelter to Housing Continuum Project, and then street response, an update a week after their launch. And then we have time for updates, committee updates, and then approving minutes, and then just discussing topics for the next meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to.
I have an alternative agenda. It's in our bylaws. We're supposed to be able to get to present alternative agendas at the start of the meeting. We're supposed to interrupt to do it.
Go for it.
So I'm proposing an alternative agenda to the one presented. For this meeting, I think it is important to have a community-led two-part discussion on the unethical, bigoted, and non-transparent actions of the current LNA board. Additionally, the fundamental failure of the LNA board to engage the Lentz community, follow the LNA bylaws or community directives.
So I'm going to share my screen so that we can refamiliarize ourselves with the code of conduct, which states, and it's very important to follow this code of conduct if we want to engage tonight.
I'm sorry, I presented a motion. If anybody seconds it, that's the protocol.
I'm sorry, but I was speaking right now. Please don't interrupt me. This is also in our code of conduct.
Point of order. Sorry, there's a point of order.
Right?
A point of order, right?
I will get to the vote in just a second. So very important that we don't place blame and we don't speak uninterrupted, we don't interrupt, and we don't insult others or place blame. So the way you've introduced your alternative agenda kind of breaks all of those. So that's why it's relevant to say that. It's kind of a futile exercise, but is there anyone here who would like to second Robert's agenda?
I'm not sure if I understood what Robert's agenda was.
Allow me to explain. The LNA continues to have a history where a lot of community members feel alienated, abused, attacked, left out. And I think it's important that if the LNA is going to function reasonably, at some point, we need to have a discussion, not led by the instigators of some of these actions or proposed instigators, but in fact, by the community that's been impacted by the actions of the board. So I'm suggesting we have, just with these few topics. I know that it's being taken and kind of recharacterized as allegations, but I would suggest that they are in fact issues that have come up for the last 4 years, the last 2 years specifically, and in the last election specifically. So I'm suggesting as a community, we have a conversation around this, so we have a better community.
Okay, is there anyone who wants to second that? Okay, we have a second, and now we can have a discussion. So if there are concerns about the LNA board, we do have a process for addressing those things, and we are currently addressing them. We are not here to hang anyone or to have a trial tonight. We're here to have a meeting to inform the community, and that's why we have asked the folks with street response and with shelter to housing continuum to take time off their busy lives and present tonight. And so just to offer a little bit of context for that.
So if it's a discussion rather than a narration, I'm happy to offer some examples where there's been ageist attacks against elders in our community that are literally ignored. I've been witness to it firsthand. I've been the victim of bigotry based on disability.
Okay, but this is not what we're doing right now. Right now, we are discussing if we want to add this to the agenda.
And I was providing context, just like you did. Is that not okay for community members? It's only okay for you?
Well, you're diving into the topics that are in violation of our agreements, and it's not what we're here to do tonight.
I don't know that it's in violation to have a conversation. I guess if your intention is no community input, no transparency, I guess that would be a violation, but I guess I'm not understanding. So my point was that there's a couple people here that have in fact personal accounts relative to these topics, and that's what I was suggesting. Maybe we could have the conversation around.
Okay.
So it looks like there is some discussion in the chat. Specifically, we have comments of folks who would like to vote on the motion since it did get seconded, and additional comments that they would like to stick with the agenda that's scheduled for tonight. So it sounds like we should call a vote on Robert's proposed alternate agenda. So if you would like to vote to change the agenda to Robert's proposed alternate agenda, please vote yes in the chat. If no, please vote no in the chat.
And to clarify, a no vote means we are sticking with the agenda that means having a discussion. Oh, sorry, I got distracted reading the responses. Sticking with the agenda that was presented initially. Let me just share that again. There we go. Oops, hopefully you can see my screen here. And these are the topics of discussion. And to vote, you must be an LNA member. That means that you have to live in Lents or run a business or own a business in Lents. And you must be at least 18 and have signed into at least one meeting. If you're here tonight, that counts as signing in for one meeting. Okay, so.
Sabina, can I just interrupt to make sure everyone knows that Eric Instrom is here in a time-sensitive discussion. So I think the other thing can maybe be saved to another date because Eric, this is the time he has shared with us, and I think it's a very important discussion for our neighborhood.
Thank you, Autumn. So, okay.
So the count that I have is 1 yes, 11 no's, and no abstentions for a total of 12 votes. So the motion does not pass.
Okay, great.
I did also
and
see your comment, David.
I hear
Thank you for that. Sorry.
What's that?
David just made the comment that he'd like to revisit, so we can definitely make sure that happens.
Okay. Has everyone voted or does anyone else want to vote? If you can't type in the chat, then you can also vote by speaking up. And I hear you, Autumn. We're going to give as much time as we're able to Eric and to folks to be able to speak up and voice their concerns. Just because of the nature of these conversations, we do want to take just a couple more minutes to talk about principles of nonviolent communication, which is why Raven Drake from Street Response is here. Raven has been coming to to a few meetings recently and is committed to helping us better communicate with each other and try to think of it as, well, our intent, I should say, with having Raven introduce this is to hopefully help us with the discussion that will take place for the next two topics, how we can better express ourselves and make sure that we hear each other and we're really listening to each other. Raven?
Thank you, Sabine. So a few real quick basics of nonviolent communication is that you want to stay away from generalized statements. You want to use more I statements. You're talking for yourself, not a generalization of your people or your street. You speak of your own experiences. And when you approach people, same way that we approach anybody, you want to avoid certain cues that are inherently in our body language, which is the biggest factor within nonviolent communication. A lot of the times the words we're saying are not what set people off. It's the body language that goes with it. Things like crossing your arm and looking defensive, things like pointing and, making very aggressive kind of hand movements at people. Another thing that is very powerful with nonviolent communication is to get on the same level with somebody. So if, say, you're out on the street and you're talking to someone who's sitting down on the curb, is leaning down and getting at the eye level with them and having a conversation, looking people in the eye, using I statements and avoiding certain normal, avoiding the I'm sorry train. This is a big one, especially when dealing with people who deal with trauma on the street, is instead of saying, someone comes up and asks you for something, instead of saying, sorry, don't have that. Sorry, I'm sorry, I don't have that, and making them feel as if they imposed on you. It's simply much easier and much more peaceful to say things like, I currently don't have that, but if you, and maybe write it down and say, maybe the next time I come here, I can bring something like that by for you. And that's kind of real quick cues on nonviolent communication. You have to understand that when you speak in nonviolent communication, you have to deliver to somebody what you want to say in the same way you would like it delivered to yourself. So if you approach someone in a hostile manner or loud voice and very aggressive, then that's usually what you'll receive. So if you want to de-escalate a situation and keep it peaceful, then you have to take a breath. What I do for myself is I take a breath and count to 5 and then I answer, and try to remember that if I push my voice out, become loud, become aggressive, then that is where the tone of the conversation will go. And so those are just a few pointers.
Thank you, Raven. And I see a comment from Cora who says, please don't look people in the eye. That may not be neurotypical and are uncomfortable with eye contact. I hear that. And I think like the main takeaway is for when we do get to the discussion after Eric's presentation, it'd be good, if people express any kind of frustrations or anything, to keep it to like a kind of avoid placing blame and keep it more to like I statements. Certainly if you have frustrations to express, you can say like why this is affecting you and all that. Anyway, thank you for listening to that, everyone. And without further ado, now we're going to turn it over to Eric, who's here with Shelter to Housing Continuum. And at this point, I'm going to be moving into a supportive role as a moderator, and I will let Jean kind of take over and facilitate.
Thanks for the introduction. Once again, my name is Eric Engstrom. I manage the comprehensive planning group in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'm here to talk about the Shelter to Housing Continuum proposal. And I guess right off the bat, I will just mention that my role in this is as someone who's working on proposals to change zoning and land use regulations. I'm not the person, and BPS is not the agency that directly runs homeless facilities or is involved in direct response on the street. So we're coming at this from a regulatory perspective of what the city's land use codes say about different types of facilities and housing types. And so I guess what that means for this kind of discussion is I'm not an expert on all topics related to homelessness. And so I may in some cases say that I can't answer a question if it's more directly about a specific situation or about how facilities are managed directly on a day-to-day basis. So with that caveat, the sheltered housing continuum is, as I said, it's a legislative proposal to change the rules about how the city's zoning code deals with a variety of things. There's 4 main elements of the proposal. The first element is to change the way homeless shelters are regulated to reduce the number of times that a new shelter would require what's called a conditional use review. And in the land use world, uses of land are usually classified as allowed or conditional or not allowed or prohibited. And so allowed means kind of, as it sounds, that you can go get a permit for that kind of use or build a structure that's for that kind of use in a fairly straightforward way. Conditional usually means that there's a subjective decision being made by the city, and often that means there'll be public hearings and a greater level of community dialogue. And then prohibited is kind of self-explanatory as well. So we're changing the thresholds in the zoning code that govern when a conditional use is required for shelters. The second major component of the project is to introduce a new type of shelter to the types of shelters that are described in the zoning code. Homeless shelters and related facilities are a community service use in the zoning world, and which is different than like a residential use or a commercial use. There are currently 2 types of shelters in the city's regulations. There's something called a mass shelter, which is what you typically think of when you hear about a homeless shelter. It's where people are sheltered in maybe a facility with bunks or beds, but people don't have individual rooms necessarily. We also have something called the transitional shelter, which is more like an apartment building where people are sheltered in individual, more private spaces. What we're doing with the Sheltered Housing Continuum Project is proposing a new category called an outdoor shelter, which is based on some of our experiences over the past decade with alternative shelter models, such as the Kenton Women's Village, where people are sheltered in a variety of different means that are more on an outdoor site, where maybe facilities are brought in. So a good example of this recently is the new St. John's facility that has a series of cabins, and then there's a common room on part of the site with some bathrooms and a meeting space and a kitchen. Dignity Village is another sort of version of this. The city of Beaverton runs something called a safe parking program, which is also a version of this where people sleep in their vehicles, but there's also some on-site facilities. So the new outdoor shelter provision would normalize the permitting of facilities like this. Up till now, all of these have been kind of approved as one-off things by city council, making individual decisions to override the normal zoning code. So this is, again, is sort of providing a long-term classification for this use and making it a more normal part of our codes. The third element of the proposal is more about housing. And in the city zoning code, there are 2 types of residential uses. There are what's called household living, and then there's group living. Household living is what most people think of when they think of single dwelling neighborhoods. It's where a group of people that are often related to each other live. The definition of household in many zoning codes, including Portland's, has always been based on the relationship of the people living there. So it talks about, households as related people by marriage or blood, or more recently, the codes have been amended to acknowledge domestic partnership and also acknowledge other elements of like the ADA and disability housing. And so, but at the core, this definition is kind of based on a fairly culturally specific idea about what single family housing should be. And what we're proposing to do is remove that, the element of the definition that deals with how people are related to one another, and make it more about the number of bedrooms and kitchens in a building rather than whether or not the residents are married or related to one another. Group living traditionally has been things like dormitories, single room occupancy buildings. Some kinds of co-housing facilities are also classified as group living or elder care facilities. Basically, group living is where there's a much larger number of bedrooms or beds relative to the number of kitchens and bathrooms, where there's more sharing of those facilities. And what we're doing, aside from changing the definition, is allowing group living by right in single dwelling neighborhoods. Up till now, that use has required a conditional use permit. So we're making it easier to provide different types of housing in single dwelling zones, and no longer restricting that based on personal relationships of the residents in the homes. These facilities would still be governed by the overall mass and scale and height and setbacks of houses. So it's not a proposal to allow enormous buildings in single dwelling zones, but it does change what's allowed in terms of uses. The final element of the project relates to occupancy of RVs and tiny houses on wheels. And as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, there are quite a few people living in Portland now on the streets or on private property in vehicles, including RVs and occasionally self-built tiny houses on wheels. This proposal, well, let me step back one. Up till now, the city's regulations have not allowed people to live in vehicles, and the city has been de-emphasizing enforcement of those rules over the recent years during the housing emergency and also under the COVID emergency. What we're proposing to do is allow on any property where there's a house, for that property to also host an occupied RV or tiny house on wheels, a little bit analogous to how we allow accessory dwelling units, but this would be kind of a different thing. What that would do is create a legal place for people to live in a vehicle, and potentially provide an option that is different than just people parking along the edge of the street. So those are the four major elements of the proposal. This includes amending, all of this is accomplished by amending the zoning code, which is Title 33 of the city code. And then there's about a dozen other city codes that have related supporting amendments to them. The RV tiny house on wheels element also involves Title 29, which is the city's nuisance code. With any legislative project that changes the zoning code, we've been going through a process of vetting and refining the proposal. We started last year with a discussion draft that was released in the fall. We took public comment on that, and then we went to the city's Planning and Sustainability Commission. In December, they held some hearings, and then they had some work sessions in January. They issued their recommendation at the end of January, and recently we published on our website what's called the recommended draft, which is the final version that's headed for City Council for them to hold a hearing. We have now scheduled a hearing at City Council for March 17th. And we are accepting public comments through the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability's website on the current version of the proposal. One of the reasons for initiating this project was to learn from our experiences during the housing emergency, where a lot of codes have been waived, and try to come up with a more ongoing normalized system that gives us a little more flexibility for these elements that I just discussed, that would not require us to be, forever in a state of emergency where we're waiving regulations. So this sets a new bar for what those regulations would be going forward. The current housing emergency is slated to end in April of this year. And so the council initially directed us to bring this proposal back to them before then, with the idea that they would have these new regulations in place before the emergency or as the emergency expires. And it's sort of a separate political question about whether they extend the emergency declaration again, but the idea was to have these new codes at the ready before that would have to happen. So that's a really whirlwind tour of the proposal, and I'd be happy to try and take questions based on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. So if you have questions, please go ahead and use that reactions raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. I see that Daniel, Joanne, and Jennifer are modeling this. I'll try to call on you in order. If you are having trouble with that, I will periodically look through the videos, or you can go ahead and type in the chat and I'll try to get you in the queue. So without further ado, Eric, we've got lots of hands up. Daniel, we'll start with you. Really quick, one more reminder, because there are a lot of questions, we're going to go with one question per person. So I'm going to apologize in advance if it seems like I'm cutting you off, but let's try to make sure that we have time to hear as many questions as we've got. So Daniel, please take it away.
Thanks, Jean. So Eric, I agree with everything you just said earlier, just 100%. But you know what my beef is going to be about? It's about where the distribution of these shelters are going to be placed. And there's a systematic bias that they're going to be not all, because that's wrong. The majority of them are going to be pushed on the east side of the city. So just to be very clear for everybody that's listening, I agree with everything that Eric said. But, and there's the big but, I think it's extremely unfair that they're all, not all, almost all, are going to be shoved into the east side, leaving the gentrified neighborhoods without having to host many of these shelters. So basically, you got a city of a tale of two cities, where on the west side, west of 82nd, there's going to be a lot less shelters, and it's going to be, the burden's going to be placed on the more diverse, poorer part of the city. So here's my question, sorry. So Portland's current zoning code for short-term housing and mass shelters currently has code language that limits the density of indoor shelters in any given neighborhood. That exists right now. The purpose of the language is to prevent all shelters from clustering in Old Town. That was the original reason for it. The current proposed language eliminates the density language, and it was partly added to allow the old downtown Greyhound facility to become a shelter, since it was less than 600 feet from other shelters. Okay, so we get that. That language that was originally placed, it was for a good reason, to prevent the clustering of shelters and their cumulative impact on a neighborhood. That's the systematic impact. As we all know, outdoor shelters have significantly more adverse impacts on neighborhoods than indoor shelters. And it seems more than reasonable, in fact, necessary, to provide a density location on them, such as 500 to 1,000 feet apart. This is especially important in East Portland, where mass illegal camps are already present and where available land is more plentiful and cheaper than anywhere else in the city. So this language, it needs to stay in the code amendments, even if it's for just the east side, because the system is pushing, the system the way it's designed right now, the amendments.
Daniel,
yeah.
I'm sorry, could you summarize the question quick?
So summary is, okay, here's my question. Why doesn't the BPS support such an amendment? Why doesn't it allow that there's 600 feet separation between shelters?
Sorry, I will summarize, I guess, where our thinking is on this. Just to be clear, the proposal was actually put together by a multi-agency group of staff. So this includes BPS, the Joint Office on Homeless Services, the Housing Bureau, and Bureau of Development Services, among others. So, and the proposal going to council is a proposal that has been recommended by the Planning and Sustainability Commission. I'm sure this question will be discussed at City Council because that's been one of the comments we've received, or especially since the Planning Commission's recommendation was released. The intent of the project was to increase flexibility to allow us to more nimbly open shelters more quickly. So the general intent of the package was a loosening of regulations, and so that's the largest reason why that is not included. The Planning and Sustainability Commission had a discussion of this during their both their January 12th and their January 26th work session, and those videos are also on our website if you'd like to listen to that. During that, the Joint Office representatives did discuss sort of how they approach shelter siting, and I think the intent is that we be able to site shelters, and by we I mean the city and other partner agencies, be able to site shelters based on need. And our experience in recent years is that there is need throughout the city. Some of the recent additional shelters that have been added to the system have been in other parts of town, not just outer east. So I don't think there's an intent to cluster them in East Portland simply because there's larger parcels and more vacant land in East Portland. Again, I think it's a legitimate question to discuss at City Council. It was not in the package because the intent of the package was to create more flexibility.
But it's, that it's systematically going to be.
I'm sorry,
pushed out
Daniel.
here. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we have time after, I can definitely circle back, but thank you for your question. So I saw Jennifer's hand go up, followed by Joanne, Autumn, and Cora. So we'll start with Jennifer.
Since I'm a board member, I'm going to leave space for Joanne and Cora to go before me.
Okay, perfect. Joanne.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had a concern about outreach. I noticed that the Community Involvement Committee for the program is diverse, but when I looked at the webpage for consultant Angelo Planning, it presents as primarily almost all white. The question I had also was, were grassroots, houseless-led groups included, or just the homeless service providers that are city partners? I wanted to know what was the outreach done to impacted community neighbors that would be housed and unhoused, and housed would be renters at risk of eviction and homeowners at risk of foreclosure post-pandemic. I wanted to know how outreach was done to those without tech access or for whom English is not a first language, and that was it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and as you all know, outreach during the era of COVID is a difficult thing. So there's some limitations we've had on that. Many of our meetings have been online around this proposal. In terms of outreach to folks with direct experience living in homelessness, the Planning and Sustainability Commission did, with staff help, put together a panel discussion of people with lived experience during one of their work sessions in January. And again, the video of that is on the Bureau's website. We also worked with Home for Everyone, the organization, and met with a number of their committees and subcommittees, which have some folks with direct experience. Some of the staff involved in advising the project who work with the Joint Office also have backgrounds that led them into this work from experiencing homelessness themselves. So we also had some of that experience with the project. With any legislative project like this, we've gone through several waves of sending mailed notifications to neighborhood associations and other organizations that have asked to be on our ongoing mailing list. So many organizations have learned about it through that mechanism. We've also hosted a number of community forums online with Q&A and information sessions like this with different organizations.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And thanks for the great question, Joanne. I did see, Jennifer, do you mind if we go to Autumn and then Cora next? Those were the orders of the hands I saw after yours.
That is fine.
Perfect. Autumn, go for it. Autumn, do you still have a question?
Yes,
Oh,
yes. I didn't realize you were calling on me. So I did attend another discussion with Eric last week, and I was a bit frustrated because I felt there was some deflecting and kind of a not my department. So I asking my question, framing it for his department. So under the current proposed changes, the city decided to require outdoor shelters and camps to go through conditional use reviews for 95% of properties in Southwest Portland, while making outdoor shelters by right on 90% of properties in East Portland, specifically in Lentz and Hazelwood. This creates a vastly disproportional amount of by right zoning and the high likelihood for more camps and shelter placement here. In contrast, Portland policy dictates adherence to environmental justice to ensure all people are included in decision-making and to ensure the fair and equitable distribution of benefits and burdens. This is particularly important to minimize disproportionate burdens on the marginalized communities of color, lower income, and other underserved, underrepresented groups. Outer East Portland, Lentz, and neighboring areas are exactly the population those requirements are there to protect. You can tell us that there are just possible sites, and it doesn't mean that camps will be put there. However, without any protective language written into the code, it leaves us vulnerable to becoming the city's easy, fast-track go-to spot while protecting wealthy and gentrified neighborhoods. By allowing this inequity, you create vulnerability for overburdening us with camps and accompanying complications. I and my neighbors are simply asking that the zoning changes support equity, specifically included in the language, to ensure equitable distribution of camps by setting proximity limits and changing the by rights to include more areas in other parts of Portland. So Eric, I'm almost dead. So Eric, you said that your job isn't regulated to impact, that is determined through arguments, through agreements with nonprofits. But isn't that exactly what conditional use approval criteria does? Isn't it supposed to reduce adverse impacts and ensure projects are compatible with neighborhood uses? I wonder, what does BPS intend to do to ensure equity, to prevent clustering of outdoor camps, and ensure other Portland neighborhoods install an equal number of shelters and camps?
Thank you, Autumn.
Thanks. I think there's some misunderstandings about the nature of the proposal around shelters. The change we're proposing in code is a citywide change. It doesn't differently, there's not different wording for different parts of town. The liberalization of the thresholds for conditional use apply across the city. So I'm not sure exactly where you're getting your numbers about by right and conditional use, but the new rules would allow shelters by right in all quadrants of the city and in most neighborhoods. I think there is, maybe some of the comments come from the fact that I know Lentz in particular, because you're a town center and you have a lot of commercial zoning and multifamily zoning. There may be more geography in Lentz where the use is allowed by right than in a neighborhood that doesn't have as much commercial zoning. So I fully agree that there's more work to do on the overall zoning map in terms of how we've distributed multifamily and commercial zoning throughout the city. And so that is worth discussing as continued work that we need to do through BPS. But in terms of what this proposal does and where shelters would be allowed by right, I think we don't have the resources to put dozens of shelters in each neighborhood. So whether a particular neighborhood has 5 hypothetical sites or 100, it is not super relevant. It's going to be much more determined by where the need is, and our, the data on where we see unsanctioned camping throughout the city is really spread everywhere. And so the Joint Office is seeing a need in many different parts of the city. And will there be more shelters in East Portland? Probably, because there is a need, and until recently there weren't any shelters. But there's also growing need in many other parts of town, and so I just don't see it very likely that we're going to be focusing shelters in a particular place just because the need is spread out so much.
Awesome, thank you, Eric. The next person was Cora. We're nearing our time here. So I was going to ask Cora to speak next. Jennifer and Robert, since you have spoken previously, would it be okay if we went to Maylin and Nick if we have time remaining after Cora?
I would just like to make a statement before Nick does. Thanks.
Okay. So Cora, you're up next.
Thanks, Eric. I just want to point out that if you're going to make changes based on the zoning map and zoning classifications, you might want to make sure that you do the work to make the map equitable before you make blanket zoning changes. Secondly, my question is kind of addressing this narrative that Joint Office of Homeless Service doesn't have enough resources to cluster shelters. They're not the only entity that's going to be able to open shelters. Any nonprofit, any property owner could open an outdoor shelter based on this zoning code change, because you're granting a property right to people that have certain zoned parcels. So anybody can go on the Secretary of State's website, register a nonprofit corporation, and open an outdoor shelter with the property owner's permission. Now, there's a much higher probability that's going to happen in East Portland because the land values are lower, the cap rates on our retail land is lower in production, and there's more vacant lots, and there's more absentee landowners that just want to collect a little bit of money off their property. And we've also had a history of ad hoc nonprofits already coming into our neighborhood and setting up camps without the neighborhood's permission. So it's not a good assurance. It doesn't work. You're granting a property right, and you're doing it in a way that inequitably burdens the area of the city that exactly needs the most relief from overpopulation by unhoused populations that were pushed here from the inner parts of the city systemically. I just wanted to say that. So don't give me the Joint Office doesn't have enough money answer, please. Don't give me the we aren't going to site shelters. How are you going to stop East Portland from being overburdened if you're granting a property right?
I guess 2 thoughts on that. One is the new allowance is for community service use. So, a community service use, or the way a homeless shelter is defined, it's going to be a place that's a managed facility with that is also delivering services in some way. It's not, and that takes resources. So I don't think it's as simple as any old person deciding to register as a nonprofit and trying to permit tents on their site, because the definition of community service involves delivering services as well. So that's one thought. I agree that it does go beyond just what the Joint Office is doing, and that's really the intent of the project, is that if we're going to make a dent in the amount of unsanctioned and unmanaged camping that's going on in our public rights of way and in our open spaces, that we are going to have to get other partners involved. So it is expressly the intent of this project to make it easier for other institutions that are interested in this kind of work to get into that business, particularly faith-based institutions, churches, and other nonprofits like that. So we're taking that approach to make it easier to do as the prime directive of the project.
I just want to follow up the comment. If you're making it easier to do, you need to do it in a way that it doesn't become so easy to do it in East Portland that we're getting way overburdened. So you need to do an overlay or something that relieves some of the inequity.
Thank you for your comment, Cora. So I'm going to go in order for the last few questions in the way that they came in. That seems to be the easiest way to go from here. Also, just a quick reminder, I appreciate everyone's statements. If we can try to keep things succinct so that everyone has time who would like to speak, that would be fantastic. But thank you for the questions so far. So we're going to go Jennifer, Malin, Robert, and then Nick. So Jennifer.
I'll make space for Malin. Go ahead.
Malin.
I'm Marie. I just think this whole thing, when I look at it, thinking that children, families, single parents with children in these tiny shelters or tiny tents and this kind of substandard kind of housing, is this the kind of values that we have as a community? Is this what our vision is for the city of Portland? This is the new normal. This is where we're going. I certainly hope people that are listening to this and who know people that are in this condition because they lost their job or they got sick and they couldn't work. Is this what we really want? Or are we lowering our standard to such to where we're saying that this is okay to raise families in these kind of conditions, sleeping in their cars? Really? I mean, this is an outrage. So so in terms of zoning, do you have it zoned so that children, it's okay for children to be in these spaces?
The point of the project really is to, as the name suggests, the shelter to housing continuum is to acknowledge that we've done a poor job in the past of bridging the big gap that exists between someone camping informally on the street and getting a traditional housing situation. And so, yes, there are families with children in the shelter system and sleeping on the street. And again, I think the idea here is to create zoning that allows for facilities that can help manage the situation, which is seen as a better alternative than what's happening now with the huge amount of uncontrolled and folks who have no other place to go but being on the side of the road. And so, no, it's not I think it's not the city's long-term vision that a big chunk of the population is in camps like this. But honestly, we're in a pretty bad situation right now. And this is a bridge to help move people into housing long-term. So shelter is never intended to be the long-term place people land, but we have to have a bigger shelter system if we're gonna get through this crisis.
Awesome, thank you, Eric. Jennifer, you are next. And at the end, I will go ahead and read through some of the chat items as well. Thank you, Jennifer.
I had a question, but now after listening to Eric and the community's questions and points of view, it seems like Eric's, like some of the parts of what you've said has changed. And there's more morality added to your statements. So I guess my question now is what, kind of going off of what Malin was saying, what is the long-term vision for these shelters? So it sounded like it's going to be short term, but if we're changing code, like when are we going to change the code again? That's my question. So if we're changing code now, and this isn't supposed to be something for the long term, when do we expect that the code would get changed again? What would cue that?
The zoning code is not really a static thing. So over the years, we do change it periodically as conditions change. I think what we're acknowledging with this change is we can't just continue the current practice of forever being in a state of emergency so that we can waive codes. We need to establish a new set of expectations that is, beyond the 1 or 2 year state of emergency, but lays out an understanding of how we're going to do business for a while. I hope that we get to a place where we don't need as much of this going forward, but I don't see that happening in the near term as in the next few years. So I don't have an answer to when we would revisit this. I do, I guess, want to just clarify that the way zoning regulations deal with housing and shelter is that those are two different uses and two different intents. Shelter is intended by definition as a place where people are not, it's not intended to be a permanent solution for individuals, but in many cases, the facilities are permanent, if that makes sense. So we want to have more permanent facilities that are able to handle and the workload and the large volume we have. But as individuals move through that system, the goal is to get them to permanent housing. So there are corresponding investments being made to increase the supply of regulated affordable housing. As many of you know, the region passed a bond measure last year to increase at the regional level more funding for affordable housing. So that is helping, but it's going to take a while to get all that housing built.
Awesome, thank you. So we have Robert and Nick's hands up, and then I saw that David had a question in the chat. If you're okay, Eric, we're a little bit over time to take 3 more, and then we'll go ahead and we'll close on this item. So I'm going to take that nod as a yes. Robert, you have the floor.
Thank you. I was present when Mark Jolin came through Lentz and said, we have no aims on East Portland to house more homeless. And then within a couple months, cited the homeless shelter on Powell there to a big uproar of neighbors, because continuously we find the city taking actions literally against our community by pitting us against one another, housed and unhoused. We have this very body, the neighborhood association, just admitted or claimed responsibility for alienating homeless people, and you say we did our outreach to neighborhood associations, and we have like a variety of folks speaking out that say we want to be included, we're feeling ignored, you're pushing this on us. And when you drive into the city, you can see it. I came back from Astoria, you see it downtown. It gets, the homeless camps and such get tremendously worse as you get into East Portland. That's what we live with. And I appreciate that you gather a group of city employees that are not impacted by these things, and they say, oh, it's a great idea. But they don't live in East Portland. They don't talk to our community members. So it's very frustrating when you come in and you say, oh, we did outreach. And that outreach seems almost oblivious to some of our community members that will be directly impacted. Every night I listen to a generator of an RV. They run their generator all night long. And you're saying, we're going to make that legal. We're going to allow that guy to do that anytime he wants. I see these camps and it's squalor. They're literally defecating in tents. There's rats, and I'm not being, I mean, I help them. I'm not trying to be, depreciate. That's what they're living in. And the point about families and kids, yes, they're out there too. This does not seem to solve any of that. And I guess my question, and I'm sorry for kind of running a little long, but I guess I'm only 1 minute and 50 seconds. But at any rate, my question is, can you not do something more to better engage? Is that just impossible? You guys are paid city staffs. You guys have budgets. You have people in these roles. Why can't you do more to deliver on engagement?
Well, I guess I'll just say that I don't, Mark Jolin has a tough job, and I think the engagement that they do when they're actually siting shelters is a hard job. People have strong feelings about this. I can't comment about, specific stories about how that's gone in the past with specific shelters. I think I will say that this does affect all quadrants of the city. Almost all the staff working on this project do have direct day-to-day contact with informal camping that's going on in their own neighborhoods. There are a few tents around the corner from my house as well. So I know there are hot spots. I know that particularly Lentz with the Springwater corridor has had some problems there, and there's many of our main commercial streets have become kind of epicenters of this. So I don't want to discount the feeling that you guys might have about the impacts being particularly bad at Lentz. I think that's a legitimate observation, but our intent with this is really to provide opportunities for there to be more facilities. Many of the worst impacts are when we have those informal camping situations, and by opening more facilities, we hope to reduce those kind of impacts on all neighborhoods. But I think that for neighborhoods that have been particularly impacted by the informal camping, there should be a benefit from us opening more shelters.
I think Nick is next.
Thank you. I just want to urge my neighbors, and I don't really have a question here, but it seems as though the bureaucracy has made its mind up on what its recommendations are going to be. I want to urge my neighbors to bypass BPS, bypass the other bureaus, bypass the joint office, and go directly to your elected officials. Make time to go to city council, and whether that's at a meeting or an attempt to reach out to city council members before this comes to council, or to go to the actual council meeting where this is on the agenda, because it seems unlikely that we are going to change any hearts and minds out here of BPS staff. Thank you.
Well, and I'll actually echo that, because the stage that this proposal is at, it's actually beyond our, it's beyond us at this point, because the Planning and Sustainability Commission has already made its formal recommendations. So it's not really in my power to change the proposal at this point. It's so you don't really need to worry about whether you're convincing me personally. There is gonna be a hearing at City Council, and that is who you should be coming in commenting to at this stage. We have on our project website, there's a link you can push to submit comments electronically to City Council. And that'll go into the public record for this. And there's also a link to register to testify at the Zoom meeting for the city council meeting. And similar to your meeting, the city council, now that they're in virtual mode, you have to register in advance to testify at a council meeting. So I want to make sure that folks are aware of that and can do that if they're interested in testifying.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. There was one more question from David that we'll use to wrap up. The question is regarding what about people that are not capable of traditional housing or refuse housing? How are the shelter systems going to ensure that people can continue to a better standard?
Well, one of the things that we heard from when we had the panel discussion with folks who are currently living or have experience living in shelters, a few of them were from the more village model oriented alternative shelters, and one of the appeals of the outdoor shelter model is that it appeals to folks who aren't as comfortable with being in the indoor model, where things are a little bit more tightly controlled. Folks with dogs or vehicles or couples in some cases find it easier to deal with the outdoor shelter model or the village model of shelters. And so that's one of the appeals. Some of the residents, for example, of Dignity Village or the Kenton Women's Village have talked about that. So that is an aspect, I think, of acknowledging that people move at different pace in terms of their interest in participating in different parts of the shelter system. And we're trying to provide a greater range of options for folks, like with the safe parking option versus the traditional, inside a building with bunk beds kind of model. Those are very different experiences. So the more options we can provide, the better. And then the RV option on private lots also potentially gives folks another option to get off the street, but be in a slightly safer environment.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. So there's a lot of comments in the chat. I'm not going to read them all, but Sabina did put contact info, and I believe she's also sharing the screen with the timeline. So Sabina, if you wanted to share that briefly, we'll wrap up. But Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everyone who brought questions. It's a hard topic, and it definitely affects us here in Lent. So we appreciate your time and your candid responses. Sabina, do you want to share what you're showing?
Yeah, so in the chat, I just posted again Eric's contact info. If you have more feedback you'd like to provide directly. And then Eric, I was going to ask you just to wrap it up, kind of what are the next steps for this project? I'm sharing the screen here of what I see on the website for this, but I think it might not be, I don't know if it's like the most up to date or if it's lacking any details, about what you mentioned earlier about when people can submit feedback to City Council or anything like that in terms of next steps.
Yeah, there are two key links on the project website, and I don't see them on the screen that you're showing, but one link is the link to register for the that's one key link, the blue button there, register to testify at the March 17th hearing. That's in the calendar part of the website. If you look under events, you'll see that date, and then there's that button there. The other one is up on the upper right corner of the screen that you're showing, where it says you can submit testimony via the map app. There's a link there that provides a place you can go to enter your testimony on an online system. And the good thing about the map app is that when you submit letters on paper or email, all your contact information is kind of inherently just in front of council and in the public record. The map app separates your private address and email from your actual comment. So it's a little bit more of a private mechanism to get your feedback in. Testimony to the City Council is never entirely anonymous because you need to generally provide your name and address, but by submitting through the app, at least is less likely that your personal contact information is just going to end up on some public list.
Awesome, thank you. So it is 8:17. We do have street response here, so we'll go ahead and kick that off. We typically do adjourn at 8:30. I know it's been a long meeting, but I think it's been very productive so far. So let's go ahead and dive into that. And then we'll circle back around 8:30. So Robin, do you have a couple comments you want to make before we open the floor to questions?
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. And I'm really happy to be here with you all. We launched Portland Street Response last Tuesday, the 16th. It's been a good week for us. Part of this is about BOIC, which is our 911 call dispatch center, triaging these calls correctly and making sure that they send the right responder to the right response. It's police, fire, AMR versus us. And I think they've done a pretty good job so far. So types of calls that we're seeing and that we're already responding to. Well, one of our first calls was actually a lift assist. So an older individual had fallen and we were able to respond and assist that person back into bed. We've had a couple calls where somebody was yelling in the street. We were unable to locate them when we had arrived. So unfortunately that did not get resolved. We've had calls where other individuals have called out of concern as like a welfare check for different members. A couple members were living in their vehicles, houseless. And so we were able to make contact with them, and we're continuing our contact through our community health workers, trying to get them connected to resources within the community. We did have a call where a business owner had called because their entrance had been blocked by another individual that was not being really responsive. We were able to go over there. We made positive contact and were able to address a wound that that individual had, as well as get them to kind of move aside and let the business reopen. So we've had just a bunch of different types of calls like that. And I would say overall, we're pretty pleased with how things are rolling out, given that this is our first week. One of the things too that we're still doing as we're going into the Lents, and we have some trifolds that talk a little bit about our services, just kind of educating businesses and the public in general about our services and how they can request us. I just want to remind this group, if you do want Portland Street Response to respond, you can just call either 911 if it's an emergency, or if it's a non-emergency number or non-emergency, you can contact 503-833-3333. We can put that in the chat for you. And you can always request that Portland Street Response be the responder. The dispatcher on the other line will triage it to make sure that we're the appropriate responder ultimately. But yeah, it's been really exciting. I will say my group, my team and I actually got teary-eyed last Tuesday. We were very emotional because this is just like our dream jobs. So we're really excited to be able to finally put this program into action. And I just wanted to say thank you to you all for supporting us. I also wanted to add, we have been overwhelmed with wonderful emails from people who are like, how can we help? Both, I think, people who live in Lentz and who don't. We have individuals like who are like, we're handymen. We can go out and fix things if you need us to fix. People who have offered to donate money to us. We've had lots of people inquiring about volunteering. So we are just so super humbled by everybody's acceptance and willingness to pitch in. And so one of the things that we would like to do sooner rather than later is figure out, kind of create a formalized way that people can get involved and support the program, whether that's volunteering or whatever. And so Commissioner Hardesty has a new community engagement coordinator. And so he's onboarding right now, but as soon as he's done onboarding, we're going to be meeting with him and really talking about what that might look like to get involved with this program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin. You got a couple hearts responses coming in while you were chatting. Autumn says it's great to hear about the community response. And Abigail also supports and would love to support this program in any way. Awesome.
Yeah,
thank you guys.
Great. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point for Robin?
Not really a question, sort of a comment to back off of what Robin said, is that the ambassador program, which will be backing up PSR out of Street Roots, our ambassador program goes live next Friday. And so the week after next, we will be starting to be in the Lentz neighborhood on a more consistent and concentrated way in which, when we're ready to launch, I will be sending all that to Sabina so that she can update the neighborhood association, or maybe even post on their website the times and dates that we're planning to be out in the neighborhood doing outreach. And as people see us, if you want to come out and engage with us, we'd love to have you.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? We have a few more minutes magically. Sabina, is that a hand?
Sure. I was going to say, just for context, for anyone who is new, over the last year, initially Commissioner Hardesty's office, and then once the street response team was formed, they've been coming to our meetings regularly and engaging the community, and they've been very responsive and very eager to take in your feedback. And that's kind of how we got to also the conversation with Raven from Street Roots about ways that we can continue to facilitate dialogue. This seemed like a program that our community was very interested in, at least learning more about and having an opportunity to ask questions. So at the last board meeting, we kind of, in light of these responses from the community, we kind of brainstormed what are some other ways that we can help continue this conversation and facilitate the process. And I just wanted to run by you all kind of like some thoughts that the board have. this is posted on our website, but what actions we could take to continue to be supportive with them. One, you just heard Raven mention partnering with Street Roots Ambassador Program to facilitate conversations through a trauma-informed equity lens between housed and unhoused neighbors, and improve communications and understanding between community members. Ensure our organization represents our entire community. Encourage house folks to make space to center the voices of the unhoused community in meetings and activities, building capacity for empathy in our membership to open our minds to non-punitive solutions that help unhoused neighbors embark on a solid path to becoming housed. And if anyone has other ideas or other suggestions for how we can help this program be successful, please let us know. That was kind of an item on the agenda for tonight. We're curious about how we can be the most helpful in this process. Since it's new and it's in a pilot phase right now for the first 6 months, at which point my understanding is they will expand both in Lents and possibly in other areas too. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks Sabina. I actually have a question if no one else does. Robin, I noticed that Street Response is responding sort of, I see you, Joanne, during daytime hours. Do you have thoughts on whether that's sort of the most needy hours, and what does the projection look like moving forward?
Yeah, we looked at the call time data, like the peak hours when we determined the hours. And to be honest, the hours are longer than what we can meet, right? Right now we have just 40-hour employees. In July, we're going to add a second team, and that team will actually take on evening and weekend hours as well. So they'll be working from 4 p.m. to midnight and then cover Saturday and Sunday. It won't be full 24/7 coverage, but it'll definitely cover the majority of the peak hours that we see when calls come in. So
awesome. Thank you, Robin. Joanne.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make a point that I thought the position statement the other day was othering, and that it reinforced some negative stereotypes about housed people in Lents while seeming to elevate the board. And I'm particularly talking about the line where it says, we are committing to build capacity for empathy in our membership. And I'm with a group, Lents Strong Housing Team, that actually supported the campaign way before the board ever got involved with the Street Response. So we're very pro supporting Street Response. We've been trying to make Lents a home for all our neighbors. And actually that statement and the Oregonian article where the chair claimed to be steering the community to empathy was actually offensive, and in some ways may have damaged the work of some of our groups who've been trying to build bridges between housed and unhoused people, because it seemed as if the board was stating that they had the corner on empathy. And I really like to see the board try to use less violent, less accusatory, less defamatory language when they write position statements. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your feedback, Joanne. Jennifer?
This is just to kind of follow up with what Joanne said. When I first joined the board, I was, Sabina is the one who invited me to even be a part of the neighborhood association. So I just wanted to say, Joanne, there was a meeting that you attended, and I actually had 2 people that were houseless come and join us for that board meeting. And so I think as a board, continuing to just invite and open our minds and arms to the people that are in our neighborhood, regardless, is going to be very important. And inviting and continuing to invite people that say, I don't have time, just keep trying, and we are a part of the outreach effort. So thank you, Robin, for bringing Street Response and hanging in there with us here in Lents. So thank you. I just appreciate it.
Awesome. I think we probably have time for one more comment. Anyone? Awesome. Thank you. Well, we will end on that really positive note. Jennifer, thank you for sharing that with us. Robin, thank you for circling back with the LNA again and giving this report out on week 1. It's really exciting. And I've seen an overwhelming amount of positive feedback in this chat and in several other locations. So thank you. Awesome. So we're going to switch to a couple points of order for the last few minutes. We will start by approving the minutes from the last general meeting. So this is something that we do for every set of meeting notes that we publish. The draft notes currently are available at the link that is in the chat. Sabina, can you share your screen? Awesome, thank you. So these are the notes for the January 2021 meeting. There's also links in the video if you want to revisit any sections of it. We had folks from the Multnomah County Health Department with us. We also had a conversation with the Lentz School principals. Jennifer had some, she was looking for some feedback on training options. And then we had some of the committee updates that were listed here. And again, you can find those minutes in the chat as well as the YouTube links available if you would like to revisit. So with that, I would like to motion to approve the January 2021 meeting minutes. And it looks like Katie in the chat is seconding that motion. So now, is there any discussion on this motion? No discussion. All right. So we'll go ahead and open to vote. So if,
Can we have one more second to review it? That was pretty fast.
oh, yeah, go for it. I'll just stall and chat while folks review. If you do approve of the minutes and you are a voting member of the LNA, so you live in Lentz or you own a business in Lentz, you've been here before, I believe you have to be above 18 and you approve, go ahead and type that in the chat. Sorry, my heater just kicked on. So hopefully that's not too noisy. And I will slowly start the count from 8:30 when Katie seconded the motion.
So there's no commentary on this because there's a.
Do you have commentary, Robert?
Yeah, there's a failure to record the nature of objections present. So when, I mean, commonly in recording minutes, if there's an objection or an abstention and there's further documentation to that end, it's recorded. I mean, this is just a, I mean, I thought this was just so common as to be like normal, but maybe that's not the case. So is that no longer something the LNA does?
So are you requesting that these minutes are amended with a noted version of your objection to the motion last month to approve the minutes from December?
I mean, I would say in any instance that someone abstains and offers commentary or votes against and offers commentary, that those should be captured. And so my first is like, is that no longer a thing with the LNA? And my second is yes, please include those things. Those are important when they're made for the record.
Okay, perfect. Well, we definitely have that in the video. And I remember you bringing it up and Sabina reading it out. So we can definitely make that amendment. Thank you for your comment, Robert. All right, so I'm going to start at the 8:30 mark with Katie for the votes. I'm going to tally those right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No from Robert. Yes. All right, so we have 10 votes to approve the notes, 1 vote not to approve the note, and no abstentions. For a total of 12 votes. So the motion carries and the meeting minutes from January 2021 are approved with the request to add the dissent comment to the notes. Awesome. Thank you guys.
It looks like Morgan has her hand up.
Oh, yes, thanks. Go ahead, Morgan.
Sorry, I'm on two devices here.
No worries.
I'm doing the LNA thing and I'm doing this. So in regards to Robert's objection, I just want to make sure that everything is clear for the next time around. In the notes explicit in the recording where those are taken, I left a little link. Robert said that it wasn't an objection, that he was just saying no. So I'm unclear as to whether he would like to amend that and reverse on what he said, or if he has changed his mind.
Robert, can you provide clarity?
I mean, firstly, I don't know if the board refuses any kind of critical conversations where they're held accountable, how I'm suddenly being called out in front of 22, 21 people to be somehow held accountable in a different way than board members are expected. Beyond that, my request was when objections or abstentions are noted to record, if provided, the reason for that. So if it applies, it applies. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I was also asking the question if there was a change that that's no longer happening.
Awesome. Thank you for your clarification, Robert. Let's see. Okay, so
I think at this point, sorry, I'm just going to interject about the agenda. So when we were running long earlier, you know, I checked in with everyone, with all the committees and stuff to see if we can accommodate and make space for sheltered housing continuum and street response. And that was kind of the understanding that we would do that so that our community would have a chance to ask all of their questions, which sounds like it was successful. But with that, we have run out of time for tonight. So we are going to push, since it's already well past 8:30, we're going to push the reports to the next meeting. I think with that, with approving the minutes, we're good for tonight. And yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that we don't have another guest on here, because I think in the agenda it said something about.
I did not. Sorry, I didn't see Steve sign in for the. Sorry, I totally interrupted you. I apologize. I was assuming we were talking about the 90-second development.
Yeah, I don't think that person is here.
So yeah, I can circle back for the later date, but thank you for checking on that, Jennifer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight, and thanks for asking questions and for being engaged. And look out for an announcement for our next meeting, which will be for Tuesday in March. And if you have questions or suggestions for the agenda for that meeting, please submit them at Lens Neighborhood Association. Wait, or is it just lensneighborhood@gmail.com or through the contact us form on our website. Thank you.
Sabina, guys, I don't know if, because Morgan's hosting this too as well. I don't know if you guys want to leave me as a host or not, but there might be community announcements, and I just want to leave space for the community to be able to leave positive announcements, or, you know, something positive if we can, if people still want to stay on. And then I also believe in the beginning of the meeting that someone did mention that they wanted to hear. Usually if we were together in an environment, people would be able to have a discussion. So I'm willing to stay on if people feel like they want to stay on as a community and continue a discussion between community members in this space.
Awesome. Thank you for offering that, Jennifer.
So if anybody needs to disconnect, I don't know if Morgan, you can leave me as a host or a co-host or something like that. If you guys, you know, I know bandwidth is one of those things, but I'll be happy to stay here for people who need to chat.
We do have to have like an official end to the meeting. So that's kind of like what we're trying to do right now. and so like since it is we're out of time and some of us have to leave, so like, are you asking for like an unofficial conversation or I'm not sure exactly what we're doing.
It would be unofficial if we don't have a quorum, I mean, of the board, obviously. So yeah, if people are willing to stay on and they would like to have an unofficial conversation, I'm willing to stay here and facilitate that.
Okay, so it sounds like we should formally adjourn the general meeting. And if folks want to stick around and chat, please definitely do that. Thank you, Jennifer. Awesome. Well, I see Jason waving.
Just leaving. Good night.
Night.
Night, Jason.
So Morgan, can you make me a co-host so that I can stay on?
You already are.
Okay, and then can we stop recording too?
I already have.
Okay.
I'm not entirely certain how, if I sign out soon, if this meeting will go kaput. So let me fiddle around with some settings here.
Okay.
So.
I don't know if anybody else is seeing this, but it's also showing that it's still recording.